Hey, welcome everybody. This is the 108th episode of Reanimated, the podcast about all things zombie. Except this week, it's not just about all things zombie, it's about all things
Scary?
uh, exorcism, perhaps. Because we're taking a bit of a hiatus from zombies and heading over to Kirkman's new property, Outcast, to talk about the first two episodes of that show. And yeah, my name's Stuart, and with me, the dulcet tones of H.A. Conrad. Hello,
Hello.
welcome back.
Yeah, so I'll admit that this was tough for me. But before we get into that, do you want to talk about our sponsors?
Yeah. Our wonderful good old friends at Squarespace, the all-in-one platform makes it easy to create your own website. We've got an offer code for our listeners. It's not case sensitive and it's zombie. And you can plug that in at checkout for your first purchase and you'll get 10% off. And we heartily recommend that website building website.
That magic.
It's just magic.
It is.
That's right.
Um,
Definitely not infested with demons
no.
is Squarespace.
We had a couple of little tidbits, a little slow in the news cycle this week, and the last couple of weeks. Probably the summertime is to blame for that.
Yeah.
But you found a couple of things you want to talk about the Abigail.
Some of this is really old. Honestly, this Abigail article came out months ago, but I just came across it, and I feel like it was something that's been in the back of my head because I was also looking at as I do looking at our website at one of our old episodes about Fear the Walking Dead, um, where we showed the picture of the Abigail as shown at the season finale of season one of Fear the Walking Dead because it was such a bad CGI shot. We specifically chose that to use as our episode image, and it's a bad CGI shot of a white yacht,
Yep.
and then Abigail happens to be I think, primarily black yacht with white accents. So they went back, and what I didn't realize is that they actually in the last time on Fear the Walking Dead, like their recap at the beginning of season two, they went back and did some touch ups and made it look more like the current version of the boat.
I know, which drastic change. Which okay,
Maybe it's not such a big deal. I just think
it is a
it's
little weird.
funny that they don't have their ducks in a row when season two had been approved or whatever, greenlit for all of season one, and I just feel like they would have been leaning forward into that, I guess, a little bit.
I don't know. I think they kind of have to like maybe something about it wasn't working for them, so they were just like, okay, nobody's gonna notice if we just slide this in right here, you know?
Yeah, and honestly, I didn't until months later.
Right. And so there you go.
But yeah, it you know it would have been even less noticeable if they hadn't used like kind of a bad CGI shot to finish to show it off in season one. It just whatever. It's small potatoes.
Right. And next up, you actually found something related to what we're going to be reviewing today.
Yeah, there's plenty of material out there about this show. It seems to be hitting the critics in the right
Mm-hmm.
places.
Yep. And this particular article it's about the fact that the cast is predominantly male, but there are a lot of women within the cast, and in some ways things do revolve around them. Though I suspect we'll see a lot more of that later. But I thought that the people that we do see are driving the action, even if it's in some of the flashbacks and things like that we're seeing. And there's definitely a theme. The main character that Patrick Fugit plays, or Fugit, however you want to say it, is it Fugit?
We could find out pretty quickly.
It is not Fugit, I suspect, even though that would be fun. But anyway, it's clear that he has a lot of female influence in his life. The flashbacks that we see, especially in these first couple of episodes, have a lot to do with his mom, who's obviously a single mom. So there are those things going on, and then he also has a relationship with his foster sister or adopted sister, as well as his wife has some influence as well. So it's an interesting way to look at it. I'm expecting that more stuff is going to unravel as we get into the series.
I would agree.
So,
Yeah, but so should we just bounce right into it? Another thing about this article right before we do is that it's not only like the cast is actually probably 50-50 male female, but the exorcist, the chief of police, the main character Kyle, they're all men.
right.
Yeah, but like you said, there are a lot of really important female characters in the show. But then also the showrunner is male. The writers are primarily male. There's a lot of male stuff going on. And exorcism isn't historically a very female oriented subject matter, with the exception of what's her name, Blair. No, is her name Blair?
What, Linda Blair?
Linda Blair. Thank you, being kind of the original exorcism recipient.
Right.
Anyway, so it's just the article is talking about how there's a lot of impact behind the presence of the females who are in the show, and there are a lot of producers and people behind the scenes as well as those on camera. However, shall we just plunge right into the first episode?
Yeah, let's dive in.
What was it called? Who remembers?
Wait, the first episode of Outcast?
Yeah.
A darkness surrounds him.
Yeah, because it's finally not one that's called Pilot or the first one
Right.
or something like that, because that's been a lot of the shows we've talked about. So, how are you doing?
Oh, with this? Oh, man, this, like, pushed all my, like, terror buttons within, like, the first few minutes. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, great, wonderful. Like, because it's, like, cold open with the zombie kid. Well, I guess it wasn't a cold open. I guess they did the... Was it a cold open? Anyway, what we see is this little kid. I'm like, oh, great, it's going to be one of those. And clearly he's possessed, bashing his head against the wall, eating bugs, then eating his own fingers.
Oh, God, that was bad.
It was pretty horrible. I was like, oh, this is going to be fun for me. And, didn't disappoint.
Those were tough. Those were tough scenes. Worse, though, perhaps, maybe, were the flashbacks of Kyle with his mom in the kitchen.
Yeah, those were terrifying to me.
The framing of those shots, just like the fact that the kid seemed so vulnerable.
Yep. And you know what? They really did a great job at casting the kid. He really does look like Patrick Fugit. And there is the tension that they create with the way it's framed, as you said, but also it's so desaturated. So clearly, like the way that they handle it as a flashback is very... there's a lot of suspense there. There's a lot of fear there. And it's even in the smallest movements with the woman that's playing his mother.
Oh, yeah.
There's this... the kid who's doing this does an amazing job. Like, I'm terrified for him.
Yeah, how does that kid not have PTSD, honestly?
Yeah, no kidding. Like, this is like... And, and it's this... that's immediately something is wrong. That the mom is, like... in this long t-shirt. She's like, her hair's all messed up, so you're not really seeing her face. So at first it's sort of like, oh, what exactly is going on here? And then there's this whole creepy, like, animalistic thing that happens where she's like smelling him, and he's staying very, very, very still, like almost as if she won't notice him if he stays still.
Mm-hmm. That doesn't work out.
It does not work out for him, but it's the visuals and the way that this is shot was excellent, I thought. It scared the crap out of me, but, I think that's the point.
So after our opening with introducing Joshua, the possessed child, I think we also get introduced to the Reverend, the chief of police, the fire chief, and then introduced to Kyle and his living situation and his flashback stuff. By the end of those three sort of like introductory scenes, how prepared were you to continue?
I mean, I was prepared. I definitely was. I had to watch this in broad daylight. I knew better than to try this another time. But it was interesting enough. I think the acting was good, and I think the mystery in trying to figure out what happened to Kyle was enough that kept me going and kept me interested in watching despite my terror. But man, that little kid Josh, the things that they're doing with his body,
Yeah, Oh yeah.
Like throughout the episode, you see every sort of reference basically to this kind of like possession, and you definitely see a little bit of that weird backwards crab walking type thing, the weird,
Some floating.
some floating, the creepy voice, like all that stuff going on with this kid. And this is the thing. It's sort of like, so Kyle as the main character, we get little snippets from different people about what has happened to him. We know he's clearly not doing so well in the state that he's living in his house. It's a total mess.
You're talking about he's living the dream. He
Yeah.
lives in his pajamas and he only eats cereal.
Yeah, he's still got that X-Files I Want to Believe poster on his wall, so clearly things have not changed too much in the time that he's been there. He's just kind of living this time capsule. But his sister, his adopted sister, comes by because she's worried about him. And she's just kind of like, you need to eat some vegetables. But we hear through her dialogue, they did a nice job of exposition, though it was to me it was a little ham-handed because like, okay. And she's just kind of like saying this, that, oh, your mom was mentally ill, the stuff that happened to you. So, I mean, you're kind of filling in what had happened was an abuse situation, but clearly from the flashbacks it was a lot more than that. Mm-hmm. But he still hasn't figured it out.
It's insane that he's back in that house too. Like the fact that he's looking at that closet door, like the pantry
Right.
door, and seeing where he had been drawing on the inside of it, and seeing all the locks, and like it's kind of understandable why he's in the state he's in just from that alone, without
Right.
knowing anything else. But there's so much more to his story that we still don't know a lot of, even after the first two episodes.
That's true. But, I do like how they're not giving you too much because that's keeping the interest going.
Yeah.
And I like how he's definitely trying to piece things together, and you're hearing little parts of the story more from other characters than from him. Although he's definitely trying to figure things out. So
I'd say
when
the
he,
best version of, well, there's a few, yeah, like you said, there's lots of times when other characters are filling in the gaps in his story, but to me the best version of the best moment of that in this episode was what's her name? His niece, when she like calls him out in their living room after he gets dragged there for dinner, and she says, you hurt your little girl, you hurt your kid, and now you can't see them anymore, and then he flips out and leaves. It's like, holy crap, what
This
is
is
going
serious.
on with this
Yeah.
character?
yeah. And I like the interaction between him and the Reverend. Oh, there's some of the stuff with the Reverend is a little weird because it's sort of like, all right, the Reverend keeps like pussyfooting around the fact that this stuff is going on. So he keeps talking in general terms about evil. And, he's kind of dropping on Kyle that, hey, there's this little kid that's totally messed up. And you've seen this before. And Kyle's kind of like, what? So there's a little bit of the... I feel like the Reverend should be filling him in a little bit more than he is. He's giving him sort of cloak and dagger type answers, and I understand why he's doing that, but and it piques Kyle's interest enough that he's going to try to help the Reverend fix Josh, which is the little head banging, finger eating kid.
Kyle goes to that house because he is drawn there after he hears from those women at the grocery store that there's a kid who's possessed just
Right.
like his mom, right? So
Right.
while he says to the Reverend after he opens the door, he's like, I'm not here to help you. I don't know. He's like, I don't even know why I'm here. But the Reverend's like, yeah, just shut up. Just get in here and let's go meet this kid. And it could have gone a different way. And he could have gone in there and been like, oh, this is, I don't want to deal with this. But obviously the kid engages with him and actually tries to suck his breath out of his face.
Right, and it's totally creepy. Like when the kid starts saying he knows him and starts referencing stuff that happens in the flashback, it's pretty upsetting. And that creepy little voice and trying to attack him. And I did really love the exchange between Kyle and the Reverend, where Kyle's like, has he ever talked to you like that? The Reverend's like, no.
Yeah, I like that. It was like,
No,
he's
it
never
was,
done this before. This is new behavior. You're making a difference. It was cool.
yeah.
One other thing about his brother-in-law, or I guess adopted whatever brother-in-law, the guy who's really not a fan of his,
Yeah.
played by David Denman, who you probably recognize as being also the jerk boyfriend in The Office.
Yep.
Yeah, apparently typecast as
A jerk.
The unlikable boyfriend slash husband of central female characters. Mm-hmm. Kind of curious. I'm sorry. I mean, he looks like a nice guy. I don't know why he has to get typecast into these Maybe his character will come around though on the show.
Well, it might, but also you have to remember that he's working from information that now we know, like the daughter says to him, "Oh, you hurt your little girl." So you can understand from a father's perspective, you don't necessarily want this person near your family, right?
Yeah, but then why is the Reverend being all cool with him?
Well, but the Reverend's not necessarily like the most popular amongst this guy either, because he doesn't seem to be in the know. However, the Chief Giles, who's played by the awesome Reg E. Cathay. Did you remember him from The Wire when you saw him? I really love this guy.
I recognize that I'd seen him in a bunch of places, and I guess The Wire is the place where most people know him from, and I don't know, I feel like I've seen him in other stuff too.
Yeah, no, he's been in a lot of stuff, but he's awesome. I adore this actor. But he seems to be much more in the know with what's going on with the Reverend. So, and they seem to be friends, and
Yeah, there's a cool story there about their
yeah,
like they grew up together and they just drink and curse together all the time. Maybe it's a bit tropey to have like the bad priest storyline, but it's also cool in this context. It
right.
works for me.
So so he's in the know, but definitely Mark Coulter is not looped in yet. But by the second episode, we're seeing a little bit more of that, and we are definitely getting some, you know, he is seeing more things to maybe assist him in realizing that there's other things going on. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I'm actually I would like to see that character get turned around into more of a. It's good to have skeptics. You have to obviously you have to have them on the show to make this work. But it'll be.
But it could
interesting to
go
see.
either way, right? Because he could see some of this stuff, completely reject it, and just keep trying to fill in with whatever most normalized narrative could be, right?
Yeah.
So it could be, oh, these people are just crazy, or this guy Kyle is like totally mentally unstable. Like maybe he goes that way, which is what unfortunately, that's kind of what I'm suspecting, but we'll see what happens.
We will see. It's kind of been interesting on the show that people have seen some really weird stuff already, especially the Reverend, who has seen a lot of stuff. Like in the first, there's like three exorcism scenes in this pilot. The
Yeah.
first one is where the Reverend and the mom go and try to like do the first one. Reverend gets kicked in the face, mom gets her nose broken, and then there's some levitation going on, and like the two non-possessed people in the room are just like, oh,
What are
what's
we going to
happening?
do?
What is going on? But they're witnessing some crazy stuff, so they can't like deny what's going on.
Right. And there's this stuff with the mom, like when the mom goes and seeks out the Reverend, she says, some of the things that you're talking about, I think that's going on with my kid. And he's like, are you sure? And she's like, pretty sure. So, like, and then when you see him kind of floating around, it's like, oh, yeah, no doubt. You are correct. You are correct, ma'am.
So we get the impression that he's done this. I mean, obviously, in the flashbacks, he shows up at Kyle's house after with the whole mom stuff.
Yep.
So he's been around that
Long
possession,
enough.
but he wasn't really in the room for any of that stuff.
No.
But we get the impression that he is like a practiced exorcist,
Right.
right? Which is I'd like to see more of that. And real quickly, the guy who's playing the Reverend Glenniston.
Yep.
Do you recognize him from anywhere?
He looks familiar to me. I probably should he was like, Life on Mars, right?
Right. So yeah, he's played a lot of British cops. He's like, you look at his filmography, and DCI so and so is in like half of his character names. For me, it was he was Richard Sharp's half brother in the television, TV series of Sharp. I don't know if you're familiar with that book series by Bernard
No.
Cornwell. It's Napoleonic War drama fiction. Fantastic stuff. So he was in that, and he was also in Horatio Hornblower.
Ah,
So
okay.
he's done some really good period pieces, but similar to Sean Bean, who he plays against in the Richard Sharp stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with the fact that Sean Bean played Richard Sharp. He also cannot really do an American accent 100% of the time.
No, there's definitely something kind of funky going on with it.
And I think West Virginia is a tough accent to try and throw someone in at the deep end. Like it would be one thing to have him just come out to California and do like your generic America, but it's a whole other thing to throw someone into the backwoods of West Virginia and be like, okay, Mr. English,
Yeah, do
wherever you're
it.
from, yeah, just go for it. And but he does a pretty good job.
Yeah, it's a pretty good job.
But I'm just saying, like you can hear it. At least I can, as someone who has faked an English accent enough times in my life.
Right. What else in this episode? The stuff. Oh, so we have the first go at trying of Kyle kind of helping out with Josh and being like, "All right, I'm getting out of here." And it's interesting as he evolves in this episode into like clearly he's suffering and having flashbacks and trying to figure out what's going on in his life, but he definitely rallies and starts to take action. So, I do like the interaction between him and his neighbor, where he's going to actually, ask for something from his neighbor, ask to borrow the car.
I felt like it was really believable that they don't know each other at all, but his neighbor knows kind of a little too much about his
Yeah,
situation because he used to live next door to him when he was being demonically beaten every
right,
day.
right, and
I feel like that's a really touching scene.
I do too, and it's so that was like kind of a cool thing, and I like how despite the things that happened when he saw Josh, which would put anybody off their food, um, quite frankly. Like he's starting to try to figure things out, and he was going to actually take action, and you get the sense that he either thinks something was causing it or he wasn't positive, but now it's almost like he realizes that there's like an outside entity or something else. Like it's not just something that's happening to him. And he's going to take charge of the situation. So he goes back to try to help the Reverend with Josh. And there's things that are coming back in his memory after we're seeing like some of these flashbacks and things. And one of them is that sunlight hurts the possessed. And so that's kind of a crazy scene where he's figuring out all these things. They're building up whatever the canon is going to be for this, whatever the rules are. And the rules are that demons hate sunlight. I guess that's not too far-fetched and makes sense. But the piece that is kind of interesting is that as he's kind of going through the same with Josh, he's telling the Reverend, "Oh, I remember like this stuff happened with my mom, and it hurt her more than it should have." And then there's this kind of weird thing where he had bitten his mom or hurt his mom, and it had really hurt her. And the weird little demon kid bites him, and it causes a lot of issues. Although he does levitate with Kyle on top of him, which is super scary and messed up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I do like how it's like they are figuring things out. So the Reverend, like when that starts happening, both of them are sort of, well, what playbook is this? What do you do next? And the Reverend has no idea.
The Reverend's getting the crap beaten out of him this entire time. I
Yeah,
feel
he
like
doesn't. He's not doing a very good job for someone who's so experienced at this.
Well, maybe he's not. Maybe that, I just feel like he doesn't seem to bat an eye at a lot of this stuff, or at least he feels he's got his holy water, he's got his sage, which I didn't know was part of the toolkit, but he's
Oh, you never heard that? Usually, like when you move into your new house, you're supposed to use like a smudge of
yeah,
sage to
I've heard of that,
get
but
rid
I
of
figured that was like a Native American thing, not like a church thing.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't bring out the salt. That's the other thing.
Sure, yeah.
Um,
But yeah, so Exorcism 3 is hella brutal, and there's lots of face punching of little children.
oh, that was rough.
Yeah,
Um,
it's rough.
but then the magic blood of Kyle takes care of it, and we get this huge spewge of black crap into the ceiling.
It really makes me wonder, since he has to like give up his bodily fluids to perform an exorcism, how they're gonna mass produce this, or does he
Yeah.
really have to bleed every time?
Every time. I don't know, because that is a curious question. I was thinking the same thing.
Is he just gonna start hawking loogies on demons?
Well, maybe, or maybe, like you could start giving blood or platelets or something like that and start weaponizing it.
Yeah, maybe they'll have him just like go give blood and then water it down with anticoagulants and then put it into like an aerosol.
Right.
That's how
And
I, you
maybe
know.
that'll help. Maybe that'll help out. But at the end of this episode, he's definitely, not save the day. It's still like there's still this ambiguous thing because like mom comes in to see her kid with the crap beaten out of him sitting in Kyle's lap, and the next scene we see is Kyle in handcuffs with the
Yeah.
cops.
It's well, it's a little bit troubling because who put him in those handcuffs? How did he
Right.
get there? Who would have led the police to believe that he was responsible ever in the first place?
It's weird to me because I feel like the mom would never have called the cops on him, so that's kind of weird because she definitely saw everything. And so
Yeah, well, if
this is the first she's seen her real kid, her kid acting normal, and he's not turning his head around and doing all sorts of crazy crap,
yeah.
not eating his fingers. Like I don't think you're gonna say anything about that to anybody.
Yeah, it's I don't know, it's tough because obviously the Reverend was trying to get Kyle to stop beating the crap out of the kid too. Um,
True.
but I don't know, like it's, but obviously it just that him ending up in the back of a squad car in handcuffs is perfect ammunition for his brother-in-law to hate him even more, and so that drives that plot along. And so for that reason alone, it's kind of worth it.
Right. And then, there we do see what happens, which is that Chief Giles is like, nope, mom's not pressing charges, and there's definitely this undertone of there's something else going on here, but don't ask questions. And like Mark Coulter doesn't want to let it go.
I just enjoy like this dynamic of the priest, the chief of police, and maybe we'll see the fire chief again. We only saw him at the poker
Yeah.
game. Are like the axis of power in this community. That's cool. I mean, in most communities, it's like the supervisor of the school board, the
Right.
superintendent of the school board, the chief of police, and like the mayor. But in this case, it's just a slightly different take on that, and I like
Right.
I think it's fun.
And there's also, I do like the little tidbit with Kyle when he's talking to the Reverend and then asking him questions like the stuff that happened to Josh wasn't how it happened with his mom that he remembers. And then he busts out, nor was it how it happened with his wife.
Right.
So you're
That's
like,
like
and
a
so that's a
bomb
huge
dropping, and
bomb
then
dropping.
we get the final flashback too at the end,
Right.
which shows his wife, and we'd already seen him call her, right? Didn't he? He calls her on the
Yeah,
burner
he
that
does a
his
little
sister gave him,
silent, stocky call.
which is exactly what his sister told him not to do when she was considering buying it for him at the store.
Right.
She's like, "You're not. Are you going to call the only people that you're not supposed to, or whatever?" Because he has a very unclear relationship with his family, and so he does
But
call them. They appear to be this perfect little twosome. His pretty wife and his daughter. They seem happy, but then this flashback is hardcore. She's clearly demonically possessed, and it seems as though she's
gonna
doing
do
is
something to the kid.
or has done the breath suck on the kid, like
Yeah.
because she's coughing when he tries to revive her, and so that's a whole scene that we don't get to see the conclusion of. We have no idea what happens, but obviously he comes out of this the bad guy
Right.
as far as the justice system
But we
is
don't know
concerned.
how that happened, though.
Right, but I'm
So
so excited to find out.
I am too.
That's just the end of the pilot.
Right.
So clearly hooked in the pilot,
Yep.
right?
And he leaves the pilot with the I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna get you guys, and
Who is he even like? There's
I
no
don't know. It's kind of a weird way to end it. I think it was just a little bit not
It's
thought
weird.
out too much because it's kind of clear that that's what he's gonna do. But I guess he felt like he needed to say it out loud.
Gotta say this out loud right now.
Yep. To no one. But then, we leap into the second episode pretty quickly. So despite the fact that I am totally creeped out by the show, it's well done and I'm enjoying it and I'm enjoying the mystery. I think that the cast is great. At this point, the flashbacks, the production level, I'm really liking it. How about you?
For sure, yeah.
Okay.
Patrick Fugit is fantastic. Glenister is doing a good job despite the couple of little accent issues. The
Yep.
sister is very sympathetic. Her husband is a jerk, which we would
Yes.
expect. Reg Cathy's doing good stuff. Who else is in there? Oh well, Data. He shows up in this
Y-
episode.
Does he show up in this one or in yeah, in the second one?
He definitely shows up in the second one. I don't know if he was in like there was a scene where he's like sitting in a car watching the
Oh,
Reverend
okay.
and Kyle driving around, but I don't remember which episode that was.
Yeah.
Either way, he doesn't do anything. I mean, he shows up and is creepy as all get out and
Yeah,
plays a good bad guy,
yeah, he's pretty creepy.
Brent Spiner.
Yep.
But so this episode begins with a very captivating flashback.
Yeah. And again, you don't know exactly what it is at first. It just shows, like, again, this idyllic scene with, like, some music going, some gardening going on, and it goes wrong really quickly. Then we got some mud eating and bathing, and this is pretty. I feel like this has to be the first point
Yeah,
where
I think so too.
the mom is really Sarah Barnes is just going downward, and it's not clear what happens, but it's a pretty quick downfall.
What's crazy about it is that you think like demonic possession, they must have done something. They must like read the wrong book about, witches or whatever. But no, she's like 1 second she's spraying a hose at her kid, broad daylight, bright sunny day. Next second she's dropping the hose, looking into thin air, and then smearing mud all over herself.
Yep.
So it kind of paints this terrifying picture of you don't even have to do anything wrong in this universe to be possessed.
That we know of. I mean,
That we know of. True. Maybe she did something else previously. I don't know.
or there's definitely hints toward the end of the episode with the creepy Brent Spiner character that leads you to believe that this may be more than just coincidence. But yeah, looking at it another way from people who are not inclined to think that this is demonic possession, this could be somebody having a complete mental break. So you can read this situation either way, but for Kyle, this had to be so traumatizing. He's also reading the book Homer Price, which I really adored growing up.
We also have the Reverend delivering what must be the most terrifying sermon of all time.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I mean, I kind of feel like if you were sitting in this church, you'd be like, oh man, this dude is losing his mind. I mean, it really is literally fire and brimstone that he is preaching.
Yeah.
To a lot of women.
Yeah. And he gets one comment on the way out of the church, like, I didn't care for your language, because he uses the word asses in seats, that phrase. But I'm like, yeah, I would have not cared for any of the insanity that he was just spewing, but okay.
Right. Do they call it, like, saucy language? Is that what they call it? Something like that?
I think she does. She's kind of a, what's the Downton Abbey dowager countess lady? Are you familiar with that show?
Yeah. Maggie Smith?
Yeah, she's got a bit of a similar look to her, the old lady who's like, I didn't really care for that saucy language. It reminds me of the delivery of the dowager's, how she might have said that to her parish priest. So that's a fun scene, and Josh was there with his messed up face, but at least he's back on his feet, as it were.
Right. But they also see Kyle, the women, and there's definitely conjecture about him. So he's clearly the focal point of some gossip.
It's interesting that everywhere he goes in this town, people look at him and are obviously whispering, but they don't seem to be negative towards him. They seem to be like, whoa, it's him. Like, they can't believe. And when he runs into those women at the grocery store, they all come up to him and they're like, hey, did you hear about this? This is kind of like your situation. So it's a weird sort of it's a weird thing where he's shut himself off, and you get the impression that he hasn't really talked to any of these people since he was 10.
Right, and some of it's interesting because, for example, the women in the grocery store you get the sense that they fully believe that this is a demonic possession. They don't say it in as many words, but that's the implication, and they seem to think somehow that he might be able to help. But although all they ask him to do is pray, but there is this implication that maybe he can assist. But then there's this other side of it with some of the townsfolk, and you get this a little bit that he is damaged goods, and maybe it depends on what they know about his current situation with his family. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting thing because he's the focal point of discussion in a few different ways in the town. So it must be a pretty small town, and that's how things work. Yeah. But he is never not noticed, I guess is the point.
Yeah. When the Reverend in the first, going back to the first episode, when the Reverend talks to him about how there's a house like this in every community throughout the whole country, um, and do you feel like this show is purposefully trying not to feel realistic in that way, where people in grocery stores believe in demons, where there's a preacher who thinks that there's a possessed person in at least one house in every town throughout the United States, or where they're trying to make it seem like it's a common affliction.
I think actually within this town, I think that there's a split between people that believe and don't. I think that they don't want to believe, and I feel like it's a little bit one of those communities that maybe they're having to deal with this. So there's a certain sect of the community that's like, okay, the Reverend, we believe in what the Reverend's doing because he's getting stuff done, and that includes Chief Giles. But I think there's also people that are putting their heads in the sands because why, how could you believe that? And I also feel like if more of the community was on board with that way of thinking, the church would be full of people,
Yeah, I
right?
guess what I'm asking is if this is like an alternate universe where demonic possession, clearly this is a show about demonic possession, so in this universe it occurs, but they seem to be addressing it like it's something that is not so far-fetched as in real life.
Well, there's also some implication that it's been stepped up in the last few years, like basically
Yeah.
since Kyle went through this. So I think that there's some acceptance, but and the Reverend knows clearly what's going on, but not everybody is on his side yet or willing
Yeah.
to, because again, if the Reverend's been out there fighting this and seeing this and it's as common as we kind of see or think, I think that church would be full of people, and it's not.
Yeah. Fair. Fair. So also this episode we've got bleeding animal bag,
Oh
man, and
God, that was disgusting.
you weren't sure where that scene was going to go, but then it just turned out to be like a grouchy hunter man. And somebody's been nailing up raccoons in his neighborhood, and he's like, here's a torn up raccoon in a bag for you."
Here's a sample, and it was leaking and disgusting. But this is a good thing because it leads to some exposition in terms of what has been going on in the town, or the fact that there are things that the Reverend is handling that the cops cannot. And so you've got Chief Giles and Mark Holter going out to investigate the animal torture, and their conversation is pretty much that. And you've got a debate between the two because Mark Holter is basically saying Kyle's bad news, and this is, I can't believe you took his side. He keeps trying to bring up the fact that Joshua was beaten and hurt, and that Kyle should have been like locked up.
Hmm.
And the chief is firmly telling him, no, that's not the case. He's not giving him all the details, but he's basically saying, back off. You don't know what you're talking about, and this case is not going where you think it's going to go. It's sort of like, do not look behind this curtain. So that was kind of a cool thing. And then we see more. They see other things in the forest. The animal thing was pretty creepy. What did you think about that?
Well, yeah, it's nasty. It's clear. It's like definitely a page out of Lizzie. Look at the flowers.
Yes, it is. And then we also see a little bit more in this episode of Kyle's family, his mother, who's been in a nursing home, and some of the stuff that happened in the last episode with Josh. He's really troubled by this because I think he's gone through this whole time thinking that his mom was really trying to kill him, or that it was, not kind of her fault. Like he, because of what happened with Josh, thinks that maybe bringing her home or doing something, he can make her better again, like
Yeah,
Josh got better.
they do a good job of showing how conflicted he is, and
Right.
like how much he loved her as a little kid. They were just the two of them. They were super tight, and then she flips on a dime and starts abusing him in a terrible way.
And it's
But
pretty bad. Like those scenes are hard to watch, and
yeah,
but yeah, no, they show he's a great actor. I feel like the scenes of him in the nursing home are great, and then he makes a decision to like bring her home, which is not necessarily the best idea, but I think he feels like he owes her something and thinks that maybe he can help her. But there is the great intervention by the Reverend, who's basically like, you can try whatever you want, but every single one of these is different, which I don't know how I feel about that, because that means they kind of can make up whatever they want to happen with every exorcism, which is probably where they're going with that. And so basically he said that when whatever happened to her happened, part of her got taken away. She was damaged forever. And that, for him to sort of move on and save his own family, he's got to let his mom go.
But we also see by the end of this episode that the Reverend doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, she was basically exercised the same way, exact way as Joshua. We don't know why she's catatonic.
Yep.
But, whatever. Like, yeah. So
I think
there's an unknown there, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what he's talking about.
Well, I think Brent Spiner's character is going to tell us a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And, and it's... I don't know. I'm really enjoying the series so far. I think the writing's pretty good. And this made me want... I don't... Like, has episode 3 come out yet?
Yeah, it has.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
4 is tonight, I think, or soon.
All right. Well, I'm hooked, so I'm definitely going to continue watching.
Yeah. So other cool things from episode 2 are at the very beginning of the episode, we get to see during that flashback, he like leans his bike up against a tree, and then halfway through the episode, we see the tree has grown around the bike.
Yeah, that was cool.
Like, picked it up off the ground. Very cool effect. We've got the definite implications of another demonically possessed person in the community, the person who's nailing up all these animals and who probably lives in that cabin and has been scratching the walls.
That cabin in the woods is terrifying, yes.
Yeah. And like there's camera work that seems to suggest that it's watching the two officers in the woods, but it's not 100%.
Right. Then we've also got the dynamic with his ex-wife or
there's the whole birthday
wife.
Party. Right.
And so we get a little bit more of interest. So his sister comes over and he begs her to bring this birthday present to his daughter. And we get a little bit more, like, this isn't just that they're not talking. There's clearly a restraining order against him. So, which we kind of got from the last one, but now it's totally clear. And basically he is to have absolutely no contact with them. So the fact that he even called her the last episode is just a big no-no. And it's also interesting because when his sister goes to the birthday party and sees his ex, she's like not even sure that they were invited. Do you think that they probably would have shown up without check? I don't know. That seemed a little weird.
Well, what seems weird to me is how friendly, almost overly friendly, his ex-wife is to Megan. Yeah. It's very unclear what the status is. She's obviously uncomfortable to be there. Megan is, but and then at this point we know that his ex-wife was possessed by a demon. So and now we see her. She seems fine.
But who knows?
But is she? And like, do we trust her? Is she just like, who knows? Who knows what these things are? It seems from Joshua and from his mother that they can't control themselves. But then Brent Spiner shows up and he's like talking as if he's one of them. And he seems completely in control of everything. So, we might have another undercover demon on our hands.
And the stuff he drops, like when he's sitting there talking to Kyle's mom, Sarah, like really creepy stuff, basically saying how hard she fought and that he won't know and that they have him already. And then we see part of the flashback that apparently Kyle doesn't remember, which is that she did like have an exorcism similar to Josh. So the black, weird, inky stuff spew goes up and then tries to kill Kyle.
Or who knows? Because who knows what's happened there? Because Spiner says we got him, and yet he doesn't. They don't kill him. They're not sucking out the breath. I don't know. The thing is, we don't really know the rules. Right.
We don't know.
We're seeing stuff without any context, and we're like, what does this
mean?
But
that moment, I was like, all right, I'm in. This is great.
Yeah. Well, it's just a good show. They've got good characters. They got good actors. They got a good story, or certainly the makings of one. There's so many questions that we have, and so far they're teasing them out in a good way. I mean, 2 episodes in, there's obviously a lot of ground to cover, a lot of ways that they could screw it up if they wanted to, but so far it seems like they're on the right track.
There are, but I mean, I'm you know what, compared to Fear the Walking Dead, I'm just kind of like, wow, Kirkman, well done.
Yeah, what the hell?
Exactly. So anyway, this is really just a compelling series. It is scary, and it addresses like all those things, the things that like I think are pretty hard to watch on television anyway. So it's there's definitely a lot of themes about control, powerlessness, aside from the demon-y things going on. So I'm really curious to see where this rides out. I hope it continues to be as strong as these first 2 episodes.
Yeah. So the first one was written by Kirkman and directed by some guy called Adam Wingard, who, from what I'm reading, is some sort of wonderkind. People are saying like, oh, they like secured him to direct the pilot before I think even the comic was published. So they went after this guy. I've never heard of anything that he's done, but and he's pretty young, but he's very highly regarded. And then the second one was written by a guy called Jeff Flaming and written and directed by Howard Deutsch, who
Deutsch is pretty well known.
Yeah, I mean he directed, was it Pretty in Pink? I mean,
he's done a ton of things just in terms of his like TV stuff, like Battlestar Galactica, Northern Exposure, Numbers,
True
Fringe,
Blood,
Teen
American
Wolf,
Horror.
Hannibal, like so. I mean, he's definitely X-Files, of course. So that explains a little Easter egg in here. But I think that it seems like they've picked a pretty good team. So even if Kirkman isn't involved in everything here, they seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah, and Deutsch is doing more episodes coming up too that we're going to get to see. And then, so looking at the audience, it seems really tiny compared with Fear the Walking Dead, which started out at like 5 or 6 million, and this is like 150,000 for the pilot.
But it's also on Cinemax, which is
the thing.
It's tough, like, because you can't really subscribe and watch, so this is, and they really should do something like that.
Well, we'll see. So yeah, the second episode only had 193,000. Here's the thing, though: Cinemax has 21.3 million television households, according to information from July last year. And however, when you look at other original programming that they've done, and here's the problem: Cinemax is kind of more known for its softcore porn after dark on Fridays.
I know, than it is about any other content, which is why I wonder why he went with them. But
when you look at they're probably shopping. They've started doing original stuff, and it's actually pretty good. Banshee, which just had its final and third and final season, I think this last year, was actually a really good show. It still did concentrate a little bit more on sex than maybe more mainstream shows, whatever. But even that show and Strikeout, I think it was called Strikeout, or one of those kind of shows. These shows aren't doing. None of them are getting more than 1 million in terms of viewership. It seems like their most popular shows. They've got one right now called Clink with Clive Owens, and this show is getting like a max of 700,000 viewers.
it's interesting. So I guess we'll have to see how this plays out. But it would be a shame if this doesn't last beyond, a couple of seasons. So, but again, you also don't want to see this turn into, you could easily see this turning into a monster of the week, because how is this storyline going to play out?
I think it would be great I feel like there's definitely going to be a desire to milk this cow until it withers away, but you can also just write a really good story, just get like 20 or 40 amazing episodes out of it.
And stop it, yeah.
And then be like, all right, that's the end of the story, and then let's find something else to do that'll be awesome. So I would definitely prefer that to a
ongoing, never-ending story.
I never really got into Supernatural. I don't know if
Me neither. Other people are comparing it a little bit. I think it's that's definitely a cheesier, like, goofier take.
Yeah.
So.
But that one goes on for I don't know how many seasons. I feel like the lead actress.
I think it's been on like 13 seasons or something crazy like that.
Yeah, and I definitely wouldn't be interested in anything like that. And I doubt that a cable network like Cinemax would be interested in that either.
Probably not. Well, what do you want to talk about next week? Do you want to do a couple more? Do you want to move on to more true zombie stories?
Let's do a couple more of this.
Listeners of the show, I know we've kind of departed from our usual fare, but I do think it's worth it, and I do recommend people take a peek at this if you're into that kind of thing. If I can do it, you can do it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, so if you want to drop us a line, reanimatedpodcast.com is the website, and you can do the Gmail, which is reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or send us a tweet, reanimated pcast, correct? You
That
and
is
Mr. Tiffin?
correct. And
Awesome.
it would be handy if anybody would want to leave us a review on iTunes. We could use the feedback. And yeah, listen along. We're going to do a couple more episodes of this show, and then we'll see what we do next after that.
Great. Well, until next time, ciao.
Bye bye, everybody. Thanks.